Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Secure AF podcast, a podcast about all things cybersecurity. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Kimmitt,
Everybody.
and we're going to be talking about it's IR season. The holidays are one of the times when hackers really are looking out for ways to attack organizations and individuals. And so we wanted at the start of that season to talk about what are things that we've seen going into engagements and IRs that were essentially easy targets, but also therefore, and many times easy fixes. So ways that you can prepare and secure your organization against attackers. So Jonathan, why don't you start out and tell us sort of the landscape and maybe what are things that you see most commonly?
Well, first, I want to state that some of the things we're going to be talking about from an IT perspective can be very emotional. And I don't know why this is, but the reality is people get upset when we talk about these things. They get upset when we're there doing the IR, of course. But then when we ask some of these questions on why they did something, they get defensive, they get upset, they lie. I mean, there's all kinds of these things that it's fascinating to me. It's very strange. So that's actually kind of one of the reasons when you started talking about this topic a couple days ago, it I think it's going to be a great podcast, and I think it's going to be a great topic because when we go into an IR, things are already bad. They're having an incident. And sometimes they've been having it for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. And then we're called in to help them during the incident. And in some cases, help them do DR. And it's a process. And a lot of times we have to get through the emotional process for the staff. And then we can get to the technical side. And then I come in and I help do the policy side and all these different things. But, I'll give you an example. You just mentioned it. We get into an IR and we start asking questions. And we ask because we have to get up to speed very quickly, so we have to
Mhm.
ask very pointed questions. And one of the things we always ask them is, "Don't lie to us. We have to know the truth. We have to know what happened so that we can help you fix it." And in this case, they didn't have a firewall. That's simple. They were not running a firewall on their network. And at that point, you're like, okay, that's terrible. In today's world, not having a firewall in place of all these attacks is just terrible.
Mhm.
And but that sets the tone. That sets the tone of the whole IR moving forward. Okay, what do we have to do? The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get a firewall in place. And we have the ability to put basically a firewall in a box type things up into place called our snafu because we have to protect the network. And we have to go through that process. But looking back on it, as a CISO, and that's my job is as a CISO, I have to think about it from, okay, what are all the decisions that had to fail for the
Mhm.
last 20 years for for an organization not to have a firewall on their network? And it's not for 20 years. It's, they maybe it's a new business, maybe they've just, maybe they had one and it expired and they never got a new one, so they just unplugged it and plugged directly in the ISP, whatever it is. But it's all those decisions that had to go wrong that led to them being vulnerable to attack.
And sometimes I think it's what's so critical is realizing, just watching our guys, what's that sort of critical point of failure?
Yeah,
If you'd had a firewall, maybe that wouldn't have totally prevented in this case, but if you'd had a firewall, or sometimes it's if you hadn't had this port open, or if this hadn't been open to the internet, or, all sorts of things, because otherwise it's a lot of sorting through a lot of data and figuring
sure.
out networks and figuring out infrastructures. And so being able to say, this is what this was, we can remediate this.
Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering if it seems like maybe there's two sources of the emotionalism. One would seem to be if it's a problem, they knew it was a problem, and they just not addressed it. I'm
Yes.
wondering if the other part is, um, well, maybe three. So they knew it was a problem, they didn't address it. They didn't know it was a problem, but they feel like they should have. Like, hey, this is my job. I didn't realize this was happening. I should have known. And
Right.
then maybe a third is it's out there. I did or didn't know, but even if I had known, I wouldn't have had the resources to fix it.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about that third one real quick because I hear that a lot. We didn't have the money. I I understand. I truly do. Security controls can be expensive. Here's my question. I've worked with a lot of organizations. I'll deal with a lot of people, a lot of IT teams, and I have not yet found one that had plenty of money. It's just that's not it's not a thing. So whenever I hear we didn't have the money to do this, what I really hear from a CISO perspective is we didn't have enough money to be successful as a business we're doing.
Mhm.
It's not, and people define that success in weird ways. To me, certain security controls are the cost of doing business. If you're going to be on the internet, a firewall is a cost of doing business. And when they say, and this company didn't say it like this, and I'm just using it as an example, but we didn't have enough money to do blah.
Mhm.
I turn back around and go, then you didn't really have enough money to be running the business because that
Right.
should be part of business functions. Here's another example. We when they say that they can't do multi-factor. Sure you can. I chunk, I click a button and poof, everyone has multi-factor on. But what they really are saying is they don't want to.
Right.
And that's very different. Now
It's
they
it's
may
an inconvenience, right? It's an
yes, they
inconvenience.
may claim they don't have enough people power to support multi-factor and this and that and whatever. But we've had multi-factor for 14 easy multi-factor for 14 years now. This is not a difficult problem to solve. Emotional, yes, I get it. People get emotional over this stuff. And when I say emotional, I mean angry in this particular
Mhm.
case. I don't want a multi-factor. I don't want to do this. This is, you know, well, people did. Okay, I've got to say this. Have you ever seen that video on? It was on YouTube, but it's of I think it was back in the 80s, and it was talking about they were interviewing people who, when the first laws about drinking and driving were really coming out and saying you can't drink and drive, and they went and they videotaped people and they were angry. And they
Mhm.
says, well, I don't see why I can't have a beer on the drive home from a hard days at work. Now we look back at that and go, that's crazy.
Right.
But back then they were really upset. So I get it, it's the culture of the time of whatever. So looking back, we've had easy multi-factor for 14 years. And when I say easy, that means that Google Authenticator came out 14 years ago. So you had it on your phone, it was easy to deploy through, the variety of federated identities and whatever. But when you tell me that we can't do multi-factor, I know you're lying. You're
Mhm.
already lying to me. You can do multi-factor. You are choosing not to for a variety of reasons. Now, I understand there are sometimes that you have a technical problem. You have an application that doesn't support multi-factor. We had that. At my previous job, we had several systems that did not have multi-factor on them, that you just couldn't, the tool didn't support it.
Mhm.
But we put it behind multi-factor. We
Right.
put another page in front of it or a VPN or whatever we needed to do to make sure that you had to get in. So that means you had to multi-factor in, then you had to use your password on that system. And it worked just fine. It protected it. Were people upset they had to authenticate twice? Yes. Did it protect from attacks? Yes. So you can do it. You just don't want to. Well,
Mhm.
here's the thing. The attackers want to get into your systems. If their want is greater than your want, in terms of you don't want very much security, but the attackers want to get in, you have an incident.
Hmm.
And I've got lots of different examples that I hopefully will talk about today, but that's just a very basic one. If you tell me you can't do something, you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough money, I turn around as a CISO, and I'm not going to say this, of course, but I'm going to think, okay, you don't have enough money to run the business in a safe and secure manner.
Right.
Now, what I generally find is that when I talk to senior leadership, they're fine with it. It's usually the IT group or the middle management or even some of the leadership, but the senior executives, they're fine because they deal in risk.
Hmm.
And if you present it as here's a risk for not doing this, or here's a risk for doing something, they understand that and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Whatever we need to do, let's do it. I had a president once. I was pushing a password change. That's what it was. This is many years ago now. And passwords were terrible. And this organization, my team had cracked 27,000 of about 30,000 passwords. And so I pushed it up the line, did change management, said we need to do a password change, this and that and whatever. I was at Arby's. I had gone over to Arby's to eat lunch, and the president and the second in command was over there as well. And everybody kind of went to the restaurants up along the line. So you'd wave and move on about your day. Well, he saw me and he came right over to me and he shook my hand. And he goes, Jonathan, I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to support you in this password change. And I've already changed my password. And if I'm going to do it, then everybody else is going to do it too. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Let me know if I can help anything, the kind of your normal bumbling idiot type stuff. And, and we did, and we forced password changes, and people were upset over it because they'd had that password for 10 years and it was
Hmm.
just fine. And I had one guy, it's so funny. He had a terrible password. This is an IT guy. He had a terrible password. And we cracked it, and I let everybody know. It's like, hey everyone, we did this red team thing, and we cracked passwords. Please go and change your passwords. And he got really upset that we cracked his password. And he replied back and he goes, I don't know how you cracked our passwords because I used my password in this password checker thing on the internet and it says it would take, 32 billion years to crack it. And I was like, wait a minute. You took your organizational password and you put it on a public website? You need to change your password again. Please don't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know I went off on a tangent on a couple of different things, but those are the things that really, when I hear stuff like that, again, from a CISO perspective, because I deal with leadership, I deal with the organization, I try to get people um, the the process of doing better things is better for the business. And that's just one of the ones that, drives me nuts sometimes.
Do you think part of it is, um, I can imagine being in IT, maybe feeling like the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna be mad. We do password changes. Oh man, that's just like I don't want to take one more hit. I'm tired of this. But also wondering how common it is to have somebody like that president say, this isn't IT saying this. This is an organization taking a safeguard to protect us all from risk, and how that might change things for an IT professional to be able to say, um, this isn't me. Like this is an organizational thing that the senior leadership is behind. That seems like that might change the conversation.
It can absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I get the senior leadership buy-in on this. I work through that process of getting them to trust me, getting that respect from them, and respecting back to them, but also approaching it from a risk perspective, saying, "Hey, this is the reason why we do these." The bigger issue that I find, honestly, is not necessarily senior leadership. It's just leadership. It's that middle leadership.
Hmm.
They don't want to fight. Senior leadership, they understand that that's part of the job, but that middle management, that middle leadership, they don't want to fight. In fact, here's an example. If IT says, "Okay, department, we need to do this," and the department says, "No, that's going to affect us too much. We're not going to do that." There should be a point in which your direct leadership goes to them and goes, "No, everybody, this is really serious. We need to do it like this." And it should just be over. The people should
Right.
understand. It's not like we're trying to be punitive. We're just making sure that the organization is safe. But if that middle leadership comes back and says, "Well, they're just not going to do it, so we need to find an alternative." Uh, I don't understand that. What do you mean they're not going to do it? They're just going to say no, you know? And I was always very fortunate that I was that middle management, middle leadership, as a CISO. And I could go to the departments, and I've never had a department where I went into that I couldn't convince them that this was the right thing to do. And then they would support me afterward. Even if they didn't like me, I could get them to understand. But there are sometimes that management just doesn't want to do that fight. Maybe there's a political reason. Maybe they're scared, whatever it may be. I don't know. But they won't do it. So they won't even go and talk to them. They won't stand up. Sometimes it's difficult. We had a person in one of my jobs who he had a cane, just a regular old Walmart cane. And he would smack his desk when he got angry. And they're like, no one wanted to go deal with him.
Yeah.
I understand. But in those cases, that's an HR problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to go deal with someone who threatens me with a cane. I'm going to go to HR. It's like, "Hey, you need to get rid of this guy." That's assault. That's a threatening thing. They're trying to. So those sorts of things, yeah, you deal with, but that's different. That's not organizational decisions. That's a person that's dealing with a person. But sometimes they're afraid, and I
Mhm.
get that. But sometimes, as a leader, as a manager, you have to work through that fear and go and deal with it anyway. I've told this story a couple of times. I had a faculty member when I worked at a university who picked up one of my technicians and threw him across the room. Literally grabbed him, picked him up, and threw him across the room. I couldn't believe it. That could happen. That would happen. You don't do that in a professional environment.
Right.
And they're like, "What?" The person didn't tell me. I had to hear about this secondhand, and I was angry. And I went to my supervisor, and he basically said, "Well, there's nothing that can be done about it." I went to the provost office, and they said that they weren't going to do anything about it. I went to HR. They said they weren't going to do anything about it. And at the time, we didn't have general counsel. Um, and I was so angry. I couldn't get anybody to do anything.
Hmm.
And then I was forbidden to tell the staff member, that they could press charges. So I was a very young manager at the time. This is many years ago, and I didn't know what to do. And it was just a bad situation. That those sorts of things should not happen in a professional environment. So if you deal with that sort of thing, it sucks. Now, being, 15, 20 years older, I would have handled it differently. There
Hmm.
would have been a process that, and I learned from it at the time. And I would not have dealt with that now, the way it happened and such. But yeah, there are pieces like that you have to deal with as a manager, but it's all because of that emotion,
Right.
and that's the thing. People don't understand that a big portion of our job, I'm very big into compliance. I'm very big into GRC and contracts, but there's still a lot of emotion. that's
Hmm.
involved. And because of that, you have to work around that, both on your own side and on their side. And you had to convince them that you need to do something better. And you had to convince them to do the right thing as it relates to security controls and protections. And that's actually kind of why we're talking about this, is because what we're seeing is there are some simple things that people could be doing better that we see in lots of environments. Into that environment, it's an overwhelming decision to make.
Hmm.
But the reality, it isn't. And they really need to do it because this is why these organizations are getting hit.
Right. So it seems like as we're approaching the topic, and we do need to get to the technical, but
Yeah, yeah,
there's sort of this foundation of before you get to the technical, what is going on organizationally?
yeah,
Is this an environment in which, IT feels empowered to do what they need to do? They're supported. There's not just the finances, but middle management, senior management, that there's a sense that when IT says we need to do something, it is about that risk. This is about protecting the organization. This is about protecting people. This is about protecting, our community. Um, but if the organization isn't set up that way, if there's sort of this bifurcation between these are people, these are the computer systems, they don't really overlap, you
yeah,
know, hey, IT monkey, come fix my Windows machine instead of,
yeah,
oh, okay, you're telling me that there's unpatched software across the domain. That's a danger. You need XYZ funding to get this done. That's a different conversation.
yeah.
So I think that's actually really helpful as we enter this to maybe deal with some of that emotion for IT folks as they might be hearing this to say, okay, there's an understanding that what we need to do is not always something that we're empowered to do. Or even if we're empowered to do it, that's going to go well.
Yeah.
And part of that's just working through that emotion, say, yeah, people are going to be mad at us, but also organizationally, what can be done to um, provide also that emotional support of,
Yeah.
yeah, people are going to be mad at you, but organizationally, we're going to back you up.
Well, and I think that there's this disconnect because a lot of times IT people, it's a support role. You're
Hmm.
supporting people who are using IT, and they don't realize that there is another role that they have. And maybe they don't know this, maybe they don't realize this, but here's an example. IT people who support the staff of a hospital. Their job is to provide computer support to those staff members who are doing life safety system, life safety processes and patient treatment and things. And so they know in their head, oh, I've got to support the nurses and the doctors and the admin staff. They know this. But what they don't realize is they also have to protect the data of the patients that's on those
Hmm.
computers. I mean, they might know it from a very far off, oh, yeah, yeah, we kind of have to deal with HIPAA and such as that. But that's about as far as it goes sometimes. And to me, that's even more important than supporting the computers for other services. If someone can't get their email, okay, yeah, something we got to fix. But if I don't protect the computer that has all the patient data on there for thousands and thousands of patients, now all of those patients are affected because of a decision that I made as an
Right.
IT person. So there's a lot of times, and here's an example. We go to an IR and I go, okay, what kind of data is on that server? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, I don't know how to use it. Is there patient treatment on there? Is there treatment data on there? Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You're supporting this computer. Well, I just do patches on it. That drives me nuts.
Hmm.
You should know what computers have what data on them because you're ultimately liable for them.
Right.
And I think that's a big problem because they don't realize just what kind of impact. And I say this all the time. I don't know many IT people that got in IT because they like working with people. And everything we do is about people. So
Right.
every time we talk about a server or storage or a computer or a workstation, we're talking about people who use it or people's data that is on that device. And once in a while, I'll find someone who just doesn't care. They don't care about data. It's like, the data's already out there anyway. Who cares? But that's not their decision to make. That's
Right.
why we have privacy laws now. That's why we have more and more privacy laws, is because those people are trusting us with their data, and we have to protect it. And if that data gets out, there's all kinds of different things that could happen, to harm those individuals. So we have to protect that data. Not only should we do it from an ethical point of view and a morality point of view, but also the fact it's the law now. That's why we have privacy laws,
Mm.
and we have to protect that data. And we've had these privacy laws for a very long time. You look at HIPAA, like FERPA, GLBA, all these different things. That's been around a long time, but it's very rarely covered in any computer classes, which
Hmm.
just boggles my mind. Very rarely covered in any training classes. Hey, you have to do this because of these laws. You are going to be held liable for this.
Right. Which is a good primer for a later episode of Stray F, which is going to be called Outlaws, in which Jonathan's going to talk about how failure to comply with things can actually be,
Yes.
make you a cyber outlaw, which is not
Yeah.
what you want to be.
No, no, absolutely not.
Well, Jonathan, this has been great, and I think this has laid a foundation. So what I'd like to do is actually make this part one of a part two, and then next time be able to get into the technical, because even as you've been talking, I've been thinking about some of the common things that we see. So thank you for joining us for this episode of the Security F podcast. Stay tuned for next time when, if you've been interested in sort of the general, we'll get into the specifics of what can you do technically to protect your organization. So thanks again, Jonathan.
Yep, thank you. Like the topic. This is a great thing to talk about, and I'm looking forward to the next ones.
All right, we'll see you next time.